What is up, people of YouTube? In today's video, I'm going to be doing a comprehensive review of Sony's 100 to 400 gmaster, as well as Sony's 2x teleconverter. And on a side note, if you guys find this content useful at the end, consider giving it a thumbs up and consider hitting that subscribe button to see more content. With all that being said, let's jump into this review. Now this video is going to be a little bit on the longer side, so I'm going to include time codes down below in the description. Now let's start with Sony's 100 to 400 gmaster lens. It's a gmaster lens, so it comes with a pretty hefty price tag, but you're supposed to be getting the highest quality lenses that Sony has to offer. Now why would you want a telephoto lens? Well, it's going to allow you to get photos of things that you physically can't get closer to, and it can also provide some compression for landscape photography as well as a bunch of other things. Now the reason I chose Sony's G-Master lens over maybe a third-party lens that would be a little bit cheaper is for a couple reasons. Currently there aren't any third-party telephoto lens options that are natively E-mount, and I don't want to adapt the glass because when you are adding an adapter, you lose a little bit of image quality, as well as you don't get to take full advantage of the autofocus. The other reason I needed the Sony 100 to 400 G-Master over a third-party is I have an A7R III. It's a very high megapixel camera, and to be able to take full advantage of all 42 megapixels, you need to put quality glass on the camera. Now the 2x teleconverter is essentially adding this little element to the end of your lenses. Current lenses this is compatible with are Sony 70-200 2.8, Sony's 100 to 400, which I'm going to be talking about a little later, and Sony's new 400 2.8 G-Master. Now for the first photo quality comparison with the 100 to 400 and then the 100 to 400 with 2x teleconverter, I'm going to be going to the zoo. The reason I'm choosing the zoo is because it provides interesting subjects as well as being a more controlled environment. Okay, so our first stop on testing the 100 to 400 with the 2x teleconverter is actually going to be at Big Bear Zoo, so we can test how it is with the wildlife. Just a reminder, if you guys see f4.5, 5.6, that's without the teleconverter. If you see f9 or f11, that's with the teleconverter. Now I included the settings for the photos that I've taken up to this point. There's two photos I want to compare sharpness to right off the bat. In this top corner you can see the settings that I had for this first photo. We're going to look at sharpness. You can see that I didn't get focus quite on the snow leopards. It's on their hammock right up here. And then here's the 800mm one. You can see it's fairly sharp. You can see the hairs on its head. I am shooting through glass as well, so it's not going to be the sharpest image, but it's fairly sharp. It's not bad. You do see that I have to have a slower shutter speed because I am at f11, and you can see that I had to pull out more exposure, whereas actually I went down in exposure on this one. Now this next photo of the wolf is really a testament to the image stabilization on the A7R III and the 100 to 400. You can see how slow the shutter speed is on this image. Once again, I'm shooting in a fairly dark environment, and because the 2x teleconverter makes it f11, it does make it a little bit harder in darker situations where you don't have sunlight. If we zoom in on this image, you can see a lot of detail on the fur, and it's fairly sharp. I feel like this image would have been even sharper had I been able to use a higher shutter speed. Now I didn't go to the zoo just to show you those few images and those little clips, but we'll circle back to that later in this review. The zoo provided a good testing ground for my first time using the 2x teleconverter paired with the 100 to 400. But we really want to see how this performs in the wild with wildlife and sports. For the second part of this, I wanted to see how it performed capturing photos of birds in the Bolsa Chica wetlands. With this, we're going to zoom in on some of the images that I took. Once again, all the settings will be on the images, and we'll look a little more in depth into the images that I capture. The first sequence of images right here kind of show that the autofocus isn't as great as I would have liked it to be, but the lens is making it an f11, which makes it a lot harder for the camera to be able to use the contrast autofocus. Now, I don't have Sony's amazing A9, so I can't tell you how great it is with using that autofocus. I imagine because the A9 almost never misses focus, it's probably not going to be an issue, But with my A7R III, I did notice that it was hard to get focus sometimes, and continuous autofocus is just not an option. Now I have two images of two different birds, but it kind of serves the same purpose to show a comparison. It shows two birds in water, so that way you can see kind of the contrast differences in between both image and the sharpness difference. You'll notice with the 400 image, it's really sharp. It's really exposed well, and you get a lot of contrast in the water. In the next image, you might notice that it's less contrasty, and you notice it's harder to pull out the shadows in the duck's face, but still it's pretty dang sharp for this lens. Now this next picture of this hummingbird is a perfect example of what you wouldn't be able to get with the 2x teleconverter without going to ridiculous ISO settings. You see that the shutter speed's at 1/8,000th of a second, and it's still at ISO 2500. That's the only way I could get this hummingbird in that frozen kind of motion. If I was trying to do this with the 2x teleconverter, because I'd have to account for 2 stops of light, I'd have to be at ISO 10,000. Now that is one of the drawbacks to the 2x teleconverter, is you are losing 2 stops of light, and the 100 to 400 already is at f5.6, which isn't the fastest lens. On the 400 2.8 with the 2x teleconverter, awesome. You're golden, that's solid, that's the best telephoto for the most range and the highest quality on the Sony system at the moment. This next part is going to be the pixel peeping, really getting nitty gritty and doing a full-on comparison between the 100 to 400 with and without the 2x teleconverter. Before I got into that, I wanted to show you guys some of the image quality and what I was able to get up until this point and kind of go over it really briefly without really pixel peeping. I feel like a lot of people want to pixel peep this combination, but the fact of the matter is, where most of our content is getting shared, people aren't going to notice a quality difference. You may, because you have experience with it, but it's better to have that reach than to not have that reach. With me making my piece right there, I'm gonna just jump into it. We're gonna review this image, and we're gonna look and we're gonna pixel peep and see if we can notice a difference in quality sharpness. I'll post the settings afterwards because I want you guys to kind of have a blind test and see if you guys can tell which is which. Now this comparison is gonna be of the casino on Avalon on Catalina Island. I shot both of the images at 200 millimeters and tried to keep the exposure exactly the same. Now, the depth of field difference might give away which is which, and you may have noticed a little bit of a color shift. Unfortunately, there was a lot of storm clouds, so that kind of affected the colors. I couldn't really control that, but both of the images look fairly sharp, look pretty good. Now let's first punch in 400% with the 2x teleconverter. You can see it's relatively sharp. You got some noise here because of the higher ISO. Not super sharp on the shingles. Let's switch to the 400 without the 2x teleconverter, and you notice it's a lot sharper. But once again, you have to consider this is at 400%. And most of your audience won't be viewing this at 400%. This is kind of a perfect example of the sharpness lost when you're trying to use the 2x teleconverter. But I don't think this is a fair test. Of course it's going to be sharper without the 2x teleconverter. Let me show you really quick. Forgive the out of focus moon right here. That is the moon at 400 millimeters. Obviously it looks good, you can tell it's the moon, but let's jump over to 800 millimeters. It's a night and day difference. That moon is almost frame filling, and with the 42 megapixels, you can see that I can punch in to 300%, and I still have a plenty sharp moon that I am comfortable posting on Instagram and online and sharing, and nobody's gonna know the difference. Once again, you guys can refer to my picture of Avalon zoomed in at 400% to really see the sharpness difference. I'll keep it up side by side for a second right here. We'll just leave it up for a few seconds and you can just really pixel peep if that's what you guys want to do. However, the point of having the 2x teleconverter is so that you can reach objects that are much further away. You shouldn't be pixel peeping to begin with, because if you try to punch in post with just your megapixels and get a 200% crop and have better image quality than with the 2x teleconverter, obviously that's not going to happen. It's better to have that 2x teleconverter. That way you can have a much cleaner, sharper image for those distant objects. Now, somewhere where I think this lens combination excels at is in its video capabilities. There's a couple factors it has going for it. I need no ND filter. I can get it perfectly exposed in HLG3 at f11, and That's awesome. With the right fluid head, because of the dual image stabilization, you can get pretty smooth footage, let alone pop your camera into 120 frames per second, and wow. Not only that, with the A7R III, A7 III, you can pop into APS-C Super 35 mode, and you can use Sony's clear image zoom to essentially double that 800mm focal length and make it a 1600mm focal length. I think this comes in clutch when you're trying to capture some animals that you just can't quite get close to, like a bird in a tree. Or maybe you're on safari and you can't get close to those lions. Well, you can, but I wouldn't recommend it. And that's something that I just really love this combination for. Obviously, I'm no big safari shooter, but I imagine this would come in handy in a safari shooter's bag. Let me present to you a little B-roll sequence of some footage that I've accumulated with the 100-400 and 2x teleconverter. I've only had this combination for a few months. I've had the A7R III and the 100-400 for a while. Actually, one of my most watched videos on this channel is my A7R III 100-400 real world first impressions. Put a card right here. I personally just love this setup. Now for my final thoughts on who I think this lens is for. I think this lens combination is perfect for backpackers who need to keep their gear light, but also plan on seeing potentially some wildlife on the way, or they want to get some really nice landscapes and they need that telephoto lens for some compression. It's going to be a hard sell for the hobbyist. It is a cheap way to get more range out of your telephoto lens. However, depending on where you're sharing these images, you can see that you can get away with almost a 2x crop on higher megapixel cameras. Obviously, that example that I showed earlier wasn't the best example since I'm working with 42 megapixels. So I can get that extra punch in and then some. If you're a video shooter and you want to shoot wildlife, I would say this combination is perfect. It's portable, you can really get away with it. It's not 10 pounds like the 400-2.8, and I wouldn't be afraid to take this on a nice hike with me, which I have. The important thing if you plan on using this for video, however, is you need a very nice fluid head that's going to be able to offer some resistance and allow you to get smooth, steady pans and tilts. Currently, I'm using the Manfrotto 502 fluid head. Right now, it's about 150 bucks. And if you're using it with any other equipment, you can get smooth, flawless pans and tilts. It's already made its money back and then some on video gigs. I think though, this is where I'm going to conclude the comprehensive review on the Sony 100-400 with the 2x teleconverter. If you guys have any comments, leave them down below. I'd love to answer any questions that you have. If you guys enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. If you guys want to see more content like some of the photos and videos that you saw in this review, hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way. I also am including some affiliate links down below to the gear that I used for this video. And with all that, we're done. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.